Well, good morning. If I could ask everyone to take their seats. I'm not sure our nameplates are in the right place just yet, but they will be reorganized. However, we'd like to get started. So it is my privilege. I am Mary Ann D'Antuono, NGO rep for the International Association of Charities and Vice Chair of the NGO Committee on Social Development. I would like to welcome you all to the 6th Annual Civil Society Forum. We extend a hearty welcome to all of you who braved the elements to be with us today in this lovely environment and after a 2-year suspension, and all the persons who are attending online. We wish to thank our colleagues at DESA and the Bureau of the Commission on Social Development for opening this space for civil society and the people we work with. We're grateful for this opportunity to highlight not only the need to make productive employment and decent work effective in the reduction of poverty and the achievement of the Agenda 2030, but also to incorporate a human rights perspective and social dialogue. We hope that at the end of this day, you will have heard the voices of the people who have suffered the negative effects of COVID-19, who are hungry today, who are homeless today, who seek employment today, who lack sufficient education today to find productive and decent work, and especially hear the voices of those who suffer discrimination, who are on the margins because of where they were born, because of their gender, because of their religion, to name a few. We're privileged to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the creation of our NGO committee and to continue the vision of the First World Summit held in Copenhagen in 1995. We continue that vision of a world of prosperity without poverty, with inclusion and justice for all. As we move forward this morning, in the interest of time, I will not offer full introductions to each of our distinguished guests on this panel. Their bios are in your program, and I know you can find them online. But I will invite each one to speak individually, and I will hope that we will all benefit from their comments. So let us begin then with remarks from Jean Quinn, Chair of the NGO Committee on Social Development and Executive Director of Unanima International.
Thank you very much, Mary Ann, for that introduction. Ambassador Alfani, Undersecretary Yunhua, distinguished panelists and delegates. On behalf of the NGO Committee for Social Development, together with our friends UNDESA and FES, I welcome all of you to the 2023 Civil Society Forum. It's such an honour for all of us to be joining each other this year, because as Mary Ann just said, it's a special year. This forum has been a space for members of civil society to gather, to learn, discuss, strategise on the themes and deliberations of the Commission for Social Development. Our specific expertise and knowledge are synergetic, and we know we bring added value to the Commission each year. During this past week, our NGO committee members have been raising awareness on the priority theme and bringing the voices, experiences, and recommendations from the grassroots. We know we are preparing for many summits and policy deliberations in the next few years, and as representatives of grassroots members, we would like to reiterate that the empowerment of people will be essential to the success of their processes. Empowerment focuses on people-centred development. It embraces the call for placing people at the centre of policies and programmes aimed at improving their situation and conditions. Although we can see progress, and there has been good progress in improving social development on a global scale, progress continues to be uneven, as we have seen this past week in the world of work. While many individuals and social groups have benefited from poverty reduction and social integration, others remain far behind. Inequalities continue despite all our efforts. But we know for certain that reducing inequality is a moral imperative that can reap benefits for all of us. As we said in our declaration, inequalities have led to the consistent exclusion of women and girls, youth, persons with disability, older persons, Indigenous people, and ethnic minority, among many others. The involvement of people with lived experience is essential in securing a sustainable future for all. Again, as we stated in our declaration, participatory processes are key to ensuring that the Sustainable Development Agenda responds to the needs and aspirations of all people. What we know for certain is that empowered individuals and communities are agents of change. They enhance the prospects of eradicating poverty and advancing social integration and full and decent employment. They can help us realise the future we all want. Many years ago, I was studying the art of leadership, and I read about James MacGregor Burns, so that has to be a Scottish name, who in 1968 wrote a book calling for a new approach called transformative leadership. He believed this approach responded to the need for a revolution, a complete and pervasive transformation of an entire social system and real change. That is, a transformation to a marked degree in the attitudes, norms, institutions, and behaviours that structure our lives. This is the change we in civil society are calling for, fundamentally addressing social change and liberation, to be critically educative and to not only look at the conditions in which all of us live, but to decide how to change them. We're now calling for bold leadership to ensure quick and effective implementation of accelerated action to make progress on the SDGs, especially SDG 8 and 10, to promote sustained, inclusive and sustainable economic growth, full employment and decent work for all. As a cross-cutting issue that intersects with the achievement of the other sustainable goals, it's imperative to achieve decent and full employment for all people in all countries. It is essential that governments, civil society, local communities, the private sector, and other stakeholders come together on this issue and take real action in order to make this human right a reality for all. As we members of civil society have been given more of a voice than ever this year, we are optimistic about our current and future possibilities for collaboration with the United Nations and all member states. And so it is with hope that we continue to move forward in our call for action and transformative change as representatives of our grassroots members and those left furthest behind.
Thank you, Jean, for your leadership in empowering all of us who are here in this room today, because as you say, empowered individuals can be and are agents of change. So I wish to thank you for your remarks. Now it is my honor to offer the floor to the Committee on Social Development Bureau Chair, Ambassador Althani. Ambassador.
Thank you very much. Ms. Jean Gwen, Chair of the NGO Committee for CSocD, Mr. Lee Genoa, Undersecretary General for DESA, my friends from the civil society organizations. I'm very honored to be invited to be here with you today at the Civil Society Forum to the 61st session of the Commission for Social Development. On behalf of the Bureau and myself personally, I would like to thank the Frederick Albert Foundation and the NGO Committee for Social Development for organizing this important forum every year. As you know, the Commission is an advisory body of the Economic and Social Council with the responsibility to promote social development for all. It is a forum for member states and partners like you to engage in a dialogue, share good practices and innovative solutions, and enhance policy effectiveness and promote coherence at all levels to achieve sustainable and inclusive development. In addition to following up on the implementation of the Copenhagen Plan of Action, the Commission also supports the thematic review of the High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development on the progress and the implementation of Sustainable Development Goals. This year, the Bureau led the preparations for this session of the Commission for Social Development with the priority theme of creating full and productive employment and decent work for all as a way of overcoming inequalities to accelerate the recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic and the full implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The Commission's mandate is very strong and critical to the 2030 Agenda because we focus on social policies and innovative strategies that effectively promote inclusive and sustainable economic growth, enhance access to basic social services, provide decent jobs, and ensure the full participation of people in decision-making processes. We need to work together to ensure that no one is left behind, to live in a world of dignity for all, where all people deserve a chance to be empowered, enabling them to take full responsibility in working towards improving their own lives. Decent jobs are the foundation for poverty eradication, inequality reduction, peace, social justice, social inclusion, economic development, and personal fulfillment. Those who are most vulnerable with little or no education are much more likely to be trapped in formal and precarious forms of employment without written contracts and the benefits associated with them. They are also more likely to be poorly paid and be among the working poor. With fast digitization, we are seeing more highly skilled workers also facing uncertainty and income insecurity with non-standard, irregular employment in the new digital platform economy. For low-skilled workers and workers being displaced by technology and transition to greener economy, policies and programs on skill development, including digital technology, need to be accompanied by job search support schemes, together with equal opportunities for the most vulnerable, including youth entrepreneurship, and the establishment of cooperatives. For all people, we need to ensure the social protection policies and programs are a place for all to prevent people from falling into poverty and support those experiencing difficulty finding decent jobs. We know from evidence that social protection also helps to reduce inequalities in many dimensions. Dear friends, there can be no sustainable development without empowering the people, who must have a voice in the decisions that affect their lives. The role of civil society organizations is therefore vital in strengthening the social pillar of sustainable development. Let us all work together to recognize the disadvantages and vulnerable groups of society must be included. We must all work together, governments, civil society organizations, and the UN agencies to promote social inclusion, empowerment, participation, and social protection. Thank you very much for this kind invitation.
Thank you, Ambassador. In addition to your important words, your leadership and hard work this week has demonstrated your commitment to the ideals of the Sustainable Development Goals and to the Copenhagen Declaration. We thank you. We're now privileged to introduce Lee Juma, Undersecretary General for Economic and Social Affairs. Mr. Juma.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Ambassador Altani, the Chair of the 61st Commission for the Social Development. Dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for inviting me here today to participate in the Civil Society Forum of the Commission for the Social Development. It is always a pleasure to engage with the civil society actors on emerging development issues, to listen to you, and to benefit from your deliberation and your contributions. I will focus my remarks on choosing themes of this year's session of the Commission, namely, creating food and productive employment and decent work for all as a way of overcoming inequalities to accelerate the recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic and the full implementation of the 2030 Agenda for the Sustainable Development. With 7 years remaining to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, and absolutely, we are clearly off track. The COVID-19 pandemic and the ensuing crisis have further challenged an already slow-moving trajectory. Inequality is on the rise around the world. The Conference of the Crisis has pushed the vulnerable and marginalized in society even further behind. To overcome inequality, we need policies that support inclusion by attending to the social and economic well-being of all peoples, including through the full and productive employment and decent work. Without opportunities for decent work and sustainable livelihood, our goal of shared prosperity would remain out of reach. Dear friends, effective support to the employment goes way beyond the job creation, job provision. It requires attention to structure of our economies, attention to the sectors in which we invest, attention to the healthcare, to education, and to other fundamental elements of the human well-being. This is why the United Nations Secretary General has called for a new social contract based on the rights and opportunities for all. Against this backdrop, I see 3 areas where civil society has a key role to play. Firstly, I'm calling on the civil society, grassroots organizations, and others to mobilize partnerships like never before. We need to find innovative and transformative solutions to create full and productive employment and decent jobs for all. As lessons learned from the COVID-19 pandemic, the technology can also be a key enabler for social development. But urgent efforts are essential to bridging the existing digital divide. Secondly, I encourage you to continue to hold national governments accountable to implement inclusive policies and programs to support employment growth, enhance the quality of jobs, foster equal opportunities, and reduce multidimensional inequality, confronting especially in the most disadvantaged and marginalized groups. With the nature and the types of work transforming rapidly, this also requires the establishment of a social protection floor for all workers, including the 2 million workers in the informal economy. Thirdly, I count on you to remind the international community of the critical need for the transformative and accelerated actions leading up to the target year of 2030 for achieving the SDGs. As we prepare for the SDG Summit in coming September, let us seize this rare opportunity to correct our course to build a more resilient and inclusive world set out in the 2030 Agenda. Now, more than ever, the world needs your advocacy, expertise, and ingenuity. You can count on UN to make your voice heard, loud and clear. I wish you all a successful and fruitful discussion. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Junwa. I think the applause says it all, because you certainly have, in many ways, put a sense of urgency on our work here and on achieving these goals. And I think that civil society will mobilize and is mobilizing, will hold national governments accountable, particularly in the area of digitalization and social protections. And third, we will continue to speak out about the need to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals sooner rather than later. So thank you very much for your remarks, for the sense of urgency, and for encouraging us, because it will further our resolve to continue this work. Our next speaker is familiar to many of us. Daniela Bass, a counselor, collaborator, and the director of the Division of Social Inclusion at UN DESA, will now take the floor. Ms. Bass.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, friends, youth up there, listen carefully, because then you are going to be our legacy. It is really my pleasure to be invited to this forum among friends, NGOs. I used to work for an NGO myself back years ago when I was not working at the United Nations, and I know that NGOs indeed empower individuals, but empowered individuals, empowered NGOs, and empowered UN together can support the endeavors of member states to make our planet healthy and make sure that people benefit of the well-being that we deserve in a sustainable manner. And the SDGs that this year the Commission for Social Development has been tackling, SDG 8, employment, and SDG 10, inequalities, how employment can help to reduce inequalities. From the social perspective, it's really a very important focus of this Commission, that is to reduce the gap of inequalities through the creation of employment and decent jobs, particularly in times of crisis, like the pandemic has shown us how this can impact and affect us. I will not repeat what the Excellencies already said. I would like to add something different, if you allow me. And I would like to focus on the power of NGOs, actually. NGOs, that is non-governmental organizations, play a crucial role in implementing the SDGs in general, although I will focus more on the SDG 8 and 10, as I said, because NGOs are very well positioned to tackle the inequalities because they are present in many communities. NGOs can work directly with communities, leveraging local knowledge and resources to find practical solutions to pressing social and economic problems. One of the ways NGOs can contribute to implement SDG 8 can be to assure and ensure that workers have safe and fair working conditions, that they are paid a living wage. And this can help to reduce poverty, SDG 1, and increase economic growth. Another way NGOs can contribute to the implementation of SDG 8 and reducing inequalities, SDG 10, is by promoting financial literacy and access to financial services. And by providing financial education and access to financial services, NGOs can help people to manage their money, save for the future, and invest in their own economic growth. And this can help, again, to reduce poverty and increase economic growth, especially in areas where access to financial services is limited. NGOs can also help to reduce inequalities by promoting gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. And this can be done by providing education and job training programs specifically for women and girls, as well as advocating for policies that support women's rights and equal pay. And by doing so, NGOs can help to break down the barriers that prevent women and girls from participating fully in the economy and society. And another way NGOs can contribute to reducing inequalities is by promoting social and economic inclusion. And this can be done by providing education and job training programs for marginalized groups, such as persons with disabilities, or refugees, or indigenous communities. And by doing so, NGOs can help to ensure that everyone has an equal opportunity to participate in the economy and society, regardless of their background, age, gender, ethnicity, or ability. And NGOs can also act as watchdogs and hold the governments accountable to their actions. And they can monitor the implementation, of policies and programs that are being decided here, aimed at promoting decent work and reducing inequalities, and advocate for change where necessary. And this can help to ensure that interests of marginalized groups are protected and that progress is being made towards meeting the SDGs. I could go on and on with so many things NGOs can do. But I think that I would like to conclude by saying that NGOs play a critical role in promoting sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth and reducing inequalities. And through their work on the ground, NGOs can help to ensure that the world meets the goals set out in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And the efforts of NGOs, in conjunction with the efforts of member states and the private sector, are critical for building a more sustainable and equitable future for all, and also economic inclusion. And the efforts of NGOs, again, in conjunction with member states, can help to ensure that the world meets the goals set out in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniela. We are most grateful for your words that affirm the many roles that civil society plays, both here at the UN as well as in their countries of origin. Many of us are international NGOs, and we work very hard, as you say, on implementation of some of these programming, making sure that people's rights are protected, on the holding national governments or member states, if we're talking UN language, holding them accountable for what they've promised here at the UN in their countries, and thirdly, bringing to this great forum the needs, the critical needs, and the ideas that people living in poverty have to solve their own problems. So we thank you for affirming those roles and for encouraging us in them. And we now will move to a very special speaker who will join us by Zoom, okay? We are especially pleased to welcome Olivier Ducscuda, the UN Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty and Human Rights. He could not be with us today, but he is with us electronically, and that's one of the great benefits that we have all achieved during COVID, is we all learned to use Zoom, right? So we welcome you, Professor Ducscuda, and we ask you to please begin your remarks. There he is. No sound yet. We have no sound. If you can hold. It's not perfect, but when it works, it's great. So we'll give him a minute. And it is a privilege to have him on our panel this morning. It's just, okay, while we await our IT people's affirmation that we can get sound, I'm going to turn the podium back to Jean Quinn, Chair of the NGO Committee on Social Development.
Well, there is wisdom, because I didn't finish with this reflection that I had, so I have a chance to do it now. and it's from an Irishman in Dublin during lockdown. And it's we often talk about the challenges of lockdown, and he has engaged in a more positive way. So this is it. Yes, there is fear. Yes, there is isolation. Yes, there is panic buying. Yes, there is sickness. Yes, there's even death. But they say that in Wuhan, after so many years of noise, you can hear the birds again. They say that after just a few weeks of quiet, the sky is no longer thick with fumes, but blue and grey and clear. They say that in the streets of Assisi, people are singing to each other across empty squares, keeping their windows open so that those who are alone may hear the sound of family around them. They say that a hotel in the west of Ireland is offering free meals and delivery to the housebound. Today, a young woman I know is busy spreading flyers with her number through the neighbourhood so that the elders may have someone to call on. Today, churches, synagogues, mosques and temples are preparing to welcome and shelter the homeless, the sick and the weary. All over the world, people are slowing down and reflecting. All over the world, people are looking at their neighbourhoods in a new way. All over the world, people are waking up to a new reality, to how big we really are, to how little control we have, to what really matters, to love. So we pray and remember that yes, there is fear, but there does not have to be hate. Yes, there is isolation, but there does not have to be loneliness. Yes, there is panic buying, but there does not have to be meanness. Yes, there is sickness, but there does not have to be disease of the soul. Yes, there's even death, but there can always be a rebirth of love. Wake to the choices you make as to how to live now, today. Breathe. Listen. Behind the factory noises of your panic, the birds are singing again. The sky is clearing. Spring is coming or is here, and we are always encompassed by love. Open the windows of your soul, and though you might not be able to touch across the empty square, sing. Thank you.
Thank you, Jean. Once again, the Irish inspiration through poetry. We appreciate that in that little interlude. So now we will go back to the schedule of our program, and it is my pleasure to welcome Olivia De Scuda, UN Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty and Human Rights. Please begin, Professor.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I am delighted that this allowed us to benefit from this beautiful Irish poetry and the very moving words that Jean Quinn just used, I think are really a source of inspiration. I would like to focus my remarks on one idea that I think complement very well the excellent, very inspiring works from Daniel Abbas, the Director for Social Inclusion within UN DESA that we just heard. And that is one more thing we could do is to support the idea of a job guarantee. In human rights law, we do have, under Article 6 of the Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, a right to work that is affirmed. We have ILO Convention on Employment Policy. This is Convention number 122 of 1964, which states that states have a duty to adopt, and I quote, an active policy designed to promote full, productive, and freely chosen employment. And we have, of course, SDG 8 that has already been referred to, that is a target towards full and productive employment and decent work for all women and men. However, the question today, Madam Chair, dear participants, dear friends, is whether we should go beyond those duties of means to adopt active labor market policies, to adopt an environment in support of full employment, and whether we should move towards an obligation of result to provide jobs. And that is what the idea of the job guarantee seeks to propose. And it is this idea which I'm now exploring with a report under preparation that I will present in June at the Human Rights Council in Geneva. And there are some precedents for this idea of a job guarantee. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, in the New Deal set of legislation, there was a Works Progress Administration to provide publicly funded jobs to all jobless in America who were willing and able to work. In fact, since the start of the 20th century, we have public works programs developed in response to mass unemployment, especially in times of crisis. Often these are labor-intensive, relatively heavy infrastructure works in road maintenance, in the digging of wells, but increasingly these public works programs also include in education, in the care sectors, community work, for example, in reaction to the COVID-19 pandemic. And we have some very important and inspiring examples. The Productive Safety Net Program in Ethiopia, the expanded Public Works Program in South Africa, now complemented by the South African Presidential Service. The Mahatma Gandhi Rural Employment Guarantee Act that provides 100 days of guaranteed employment to rural households without a source of income. In Argentina, the Jefes y Jefas de Hogar program set up in 2002 in response to the crisis the country was facing. And sometimes these initiatives are not government-led. They're led by NGOs and local entities, as we have in France, the initiative Territoire Zéro Chômeur Longue Durée, Territories Zero Term Unemployed, launched in 2016 and now covering 60 municipalities. Now, the job guarantee idea is not meant as a short-term or temporary response to a crisis. It is seen as a permanent feature of labor market policy to provide guaranteed employment to all those able and willing to work. It is meant to be voluntary. It is meant to provide decent work, in other terms, decent wages, safe and healthy working conditions, social benefits, providing prospects for personal development and social integration. It should allow for workers' participation and equal opportunities. And it should serve the needs of the community by ensuring that the works created and funded will provide public goods, services undersupplied by the market. The idea is that each individual, each adult willing to work is employable, although the labor market may not be fully inclusive, and although these people may be unable to find jobs as a result. Yet also that there is enough work for all. Although employment opportunities may be scarce and insufficient, there are many unmet societal needs, such as those for the decarbonization of the economy, or those for the care economy, for support going to older persons, or early childhood education and care. So the reason why I'm working on this, and the reason why many social actors are investing in this idea of the job guarantee, is because of 7 benefits that the job guarantee provides. First, it reduces poverty, sharing basic income security. And today we have a global unemployment rate of 5.7%. Some 200 million people are seeking jobs worldwide, but that is vastly underestimating the importance of unemployment, or given the number of people who are unhappy with the jobs they have and are working part-time without their choosing that situation. So first, it's a way to include these people and ensure that their incomes are stable. Secondly, it's a way to improve working conditions across the economy by strengthening the bargaining position of workers who will have a guaranteed fallback option, ensuring that they will not be forced to substandard types of jobs. And this will also be a way to put pressure on informal work to be formalized. Thirdly, it's a way to skills building and to training through the jobs that will be provided, thus improving employment prospects of workers entering the program. Fourth, it's a way to favor the inclusion of groups facing obstacles, including discrimination, in access to employment. This concerns persons with disabilities, women, ethnic minorities, the long-term unemployed, for example, all groups that find it very difficult to have access to jobs in the labor market as it is organized today. Indeed, job guarantee programs can include mechanisms to increase the participation of women or other underrepresented groups. For example, the National Rural Employment Guarantee Act in India provides for quotas for women and provides for childcare services at the site of employment to encourage women to seize these opportunities. Public works programs can also break down gender stereotypes. For example, by training women into traditionally male jobs, such as construction sector, or drawing more men into the care sector. So this is a fourth benefit of these job guarantee programs. It is to break barriers and ensure that groups traditionally facing obstacles in having access to jobs will be provided with fair opportunities. Fifthly, these job guarantee programs provide an automatic stabilizer to the economy, preventing massive unemployment in times of crisis, operating counter-cyclically and avoiding short depressions to become long-term recessions. Sixth, these programs can deliver goods and services to the community that would otherwise be undersupplied, either because they are public goods that private actors have no incentive to provide, for example, for the cleaning up of green areas or the recycling of waste, or because the beneficiaries have a limited ability to pay for the service provided, for example, care for older persons or early childhood education and care that are undersupplied because the households who would most benefit from the services do not have an ability to purchase them under market conditions. Seventh, and finally, these job guarantee programs can be an opportunity to promote local democracy and civic participation in these programs, where the local communities have the right to decide which projects should be supported through the job guarantee and which priorities should be set in these publicly funded jobs that the job guarantee programs provide. So for all these reasons, I think if we are serious about SDG 8, creating real opportunities for all to have access to decent work, I think the job guarantee idea is one that we should explore further. And my report will look at not only the advantages, the benefits, but also the objections against such programs, including how they should be financed. And I very much look forward to your contribution to this report and to our continued discussion on what the job guarantee idea could provide. Many thanks indeed, and again, look forward to our conversation.
We thank you, Professor De Schutter. You continually encourage us with new ideas and with your research. And we certainly think that this job guarantee is something that would benefit many of the people that we work with. And I think in this, the panel, which is immediately following this, we're going to hear some discussion, further discussion on that as we look at youth seeking employment. So thank you again. We really appreciate your appearance here this morning and your words and your research. It is wonderful. Now I will introduce a critical collaborator of this forum, Dr. Michael Broning, Executive Director of the Friedrich Ebert Foundation, a source of funding and support for civil society at the UN, as well as the advancement of the SDGs. Michael.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me begin by thanking the CSocD NGO group for working with all of us once again to provide a much needed space for members of civil society to come together. It's so important to have a dialogue with UN member states and amongst ourselves, and to be honest, it's also wonderful to do this in person once again. I'd also like to thank UN DESA for once again supporting this effort at the highest level and for hosting us here at the trusteeship chamber. making it available to the Civil Society Forum. Speaking as a representative of Social Democratic Party Foundation and as a Social Democrat, I'd like to note that the priority theme of this year's session, of course, is of the utmost importance: full and productive employment and decent work. These are questions that really matter. So is the emerging issue for CSocD in 2023, addressing the social impacts of multifaceted crises. Ladies and gentlemen, polycrisis, the term polycrisis has become a talking point and a slogan in conference halls around the world, from Berlin to Davos to New York. But for millions of people around the world, the term polycrisis is not just an abstract term or a soundbite for a television debate, but it's a gruesome reality. In fact, as we are gathered here, we are seeing a really unique wave of public discontent unfolding around the world. We are faced with overlapping crises, and people are increasingly angry about the failure of their governments to address their needs and to protect them from hardship. And basically, people are upset that governments are failing to do their jobs. I'm pleased to draw attention today on a study on protest movements around the world that the Friedrich Ebert Foundation is officially launching today. The study is called World Protests 2021-2022, and it's based on a collaboration of the Friedrich Ebert Foundation with the Initiative for Policy Dialogue at Columbia University. And the study puts a spotlight on protests around the world, focusing on the last 2 years. And I regret to inform you that it's not a pleasant read. The study shows that the failure of democracy and political representation has topped the list of people's grievances around the world. And what is noteworthy and also worrying is that this is basically regardless of what kind of political system people live in. The protests that we looked at, in 65% of protest events, were addressing issues of representation. People obviously are also pouring into the street to demand and to protect their civic rights, their freedoms, freedoms of assembly, freedoms of association, bodily autonomy, freedom of thought, freedom of speech, as well as rights against discrimination. Such demands about rights show up in 61% of protests in the last 2 years. And then, of course, there's the economic crisis. Costs of living have exploded, and unfortunately, many governments around the world have met that crisis by cutting budgets and services. Many governments are failing to support a climate for decent jobs. Basically, the explosion of costs has caused an explosion of protests, and calls for economic justice and against austerity have dominated almost half of the protests in the last 2 years that we looked at. And although, of course, this crisis has hit countries of the global south particularly hard, many societies in the global north have also been affected by this. Ladies and gentlemen, these protests, of course, carry many different messages, but they have one thing in common. Unless policymakers change course, the situation will only get worse. Governments need to address the concerns of citizens and embrace the alternatives to austerity. Instead of criminalizing and oppressing legitimate protests, they should address the root causes of people's discontent. And the international community needs to play a constructive role in making sure that governments who want to act actually have the means to do so. If they don't, I'm afraid next year the cries of protesters are only going to grow louder. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Broning. As you see, this foundation is very, very important throughout the world, not only to support the work of civil society as they do here, but also so that all of us are attentive to the urgings of the human spirit, to be heard, to be employed, and to an adequate standard of living. So we thank you for your work here and beyond, and we continue to look forward to future collaborations. Thank you. And now, our final speaker, we got there, are some remarks from Laura Hicks. And Laura is a member of the CSocD, NGO CSocD Executive Board, and also the chair of the Civil Society Forum. She has managed every person every detail and the logistics of the forum with intelligence and grace. Please, Lara, take the floor.
Ambassador Al-Thani, Excellencies, Undersecretary General Li Junhua, distinguished delegates, and members of civil society, I'm honored to be here before you as the chair of this year's Civil Society Forum and for the 25th anniversary of the NGO Committee for Social Development. Throughout the summer of 2022, our NGO committee began conceptualizing the ideas that form the basis of our advocacy for the 61st Commission for Social Development. These ideas took root and blossomed in many ways, including in our advocacy priorities and civil society declaration, which you can find in the back of your program if you have it in person, as well as online. Importantly, we didn't limit ourselves just to the work of this commission. We also examined internally what our goals were as a civil society community in this new season of social development at the United Nations. I would like to highlight for you today 4 of the goals our member non-governmental organizations adopted in response to the ambitious targets of the 2030 Agenda and the UN Secretary General's Our Common Agenda report. The first is to strive to show the connection between our work here at the United Nations and local grassroots efforts. The second is to elevate the voice of civil society on the priority theme of the Commission for Social Development. The third is to recognize the grassroots gifts and use them for the work of the committee in all humility. And fourth, last but not least, endeavor to engage and involve youth. And I'm honored to be a member of the youth on this panel. Thank you for my inclusion. Our Civil Society Forum aims to put these goals and aspirations into practice through 4 more remaining sessions today. One has a focus on youth unemployment. One will provide a fresh perspective on our economic models and ever-changing global workforce. And we're also excited to hold regional breakout groups to engage representatives of all regions in a constructive dialogue. The common thread that connects our sessions, however, is the collective voice of those with a lived experience. While we were not able to have all of our incredible panelists present their testimonies and expertise in New York today due to visa, travel, and other very challenging constraints, you all will still have the opportunity to hear their experiences directly from them today. Nothing about us without us. I hope that you find the Civil Society Forum interesting, engaging, and most inspiring. Thank you, and Marianne, I'll hand the floor back to you.
Thank you, Lara. We are most appreciative of your talents, your attention to detail, and your youth. It is great to be working with you. It really is. Thank you. Okay, so now I have just one last time thank each one of our speakers for their presence, their support, and their contributions to the forum. You've been an amazing group of people to work with, and we couldn't do it without you, so we thank all of you for being here with us this morning. Logistically, okay, our day is here in this beautiful forum. We will be in the Trusteeship Council all day. The next session will start after just a few minutes of shifting around. This panel will move off, and then they will come up and take over for the panel on working towards concrete solutions for marginalized young people facing unemployment. That will end at 12:30. We will begin, Dr. Iffy will organize us into regional groups to discuss the priority theme. From there, we will actually get a break for about a little over an hour, and then we will come back to this room again, the Trusteeship Council, if you forgot where you were, and we will then conclude with a second thematic panel and the closing session. There are restrooms to the left. If you go out the doors through the galley, To the left, go down the hall, you will find the restrooms, and I think we can all look forward to, as Lara said, an inspiring day. Thank you all for being with us, and please stay with us. It's going to be a great day.
Thank you.
Good morning. Hello, everyone. We will start in a few minutes. If you could take your seats. Thank you. We are just waiting a few minutes for our two last speakers to join. Thank you. Excellencies, colleagues from the UN and permanent missions, NGO representatives, dear friends. On behalf of the NGO Committee for Social Development, I would like to welcome you today to the first thematic session of the Civil Society Forum. My name is Aria Riberas, and I am delighted to be seated in this room with so many inspiring individuals from all over the world, coming to New York City to share and amplify not only their concerns, but also their hopes and projects for a better world. My thoughts are also with the people who couldn't travel because of the discrimination they are facing, but because of visa restrictions and border controls. I would like to take a moment to thank those who made this day possible. Special thanks to Jean Quinn and Lara Hicks, and all the members of the NGO committee who put so much energy and time in this preparation. Thank you also to all the volunteers and to the founders, without whom this forum would not be possible. Before we turn to our distinguished speakers, I would like to introduce the theme of our session, which is working towards concrete solutions for marginalized young people facing unemployment. Let us start with a quote from Tyler, an 18-year-old youth from Brownsville, one of the most under-resourced communities in New York, who once told me, "A job gives you money, and money is freedom. I can finally have control over my life." Globally, around 68 million youth are unemployed, with 3 out of 4 young people in informal jobs, according to the International Labour Organization. For most marginalized youth living in poverty worldwide, their work does not mean earning a living wage. It means exploitation, very low pay, difficult or dangerous conditions, and forced layoffs. Since the beginning of the Commission, member states and civil society representatives have been discussing how to ensure decent work for all. Many already vulnerable youth are seeing negative changes in their lives as they face increasing challenges due to global health and climate crisis. Today, we are here to question ourselves. Our responsibility is to ensure that those who have been left behind have a space to participate so their voices can be heard. But only hearing their voices is not enough. We need to partner with them to develop innovative solutions that have concrete positive impacts on lives. Solutions that put dignity at the heart of policymaking. I am now honored to present our first speaker, His Excellency Ambassador Amara Sowa, Deputy UN Permanent Representative for Sierra Leone. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Aria. Good morning, dear delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank the NGO committee for giving me another opportunity to collaborate with them, even as we work on the Commission for Social Development. In my mission, I've come lately to be associated with the NGO committee. Whenever there is a message from the NGO committee, my colleagues go knocking on my door. Well, I think I'm not surprised because I actually worked in NGOs in my country and in the West African sub-region. So I'm happy to always work with you, and I'm happy to be here this morning. I also want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to give the introductory remarks focusing on the importance of youths and future generations and the need for more concrete and robust support to facilitate greater youth employment rates. According to the International Labour Organization, following the outbreak of the global pandemic, it became clear that young people were bearing the brunt of the massive economic consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic. The crisis has been particularly severe for youths around the world across 3 dimensions: disruptions to education, training, and work-based learning, increased difficulties for young job seekers and new labor market entrants, job and income losses, along with deteriorating quality of employment. According to the same update of the ILO globally, 68 million youths are unemployed, with 3 out of 4 young people in informal jobs. The World Bank has also estimated that over the next decade, 1 billion young people will try to enter the job market, but less than half of them will find formal jobs. This will leave most young people, many in minority and marginalized groups, unemployed or experiencing working poverty. Consequently, in the light of the dire economic and labor market situations, young people's mental health and well-being would have been severely affected. Today's event is another milestone indicative of the fact that we need to do more to elicit stronger partnerships and participation towards concrete solutions for marginalized young people, especially girls, children living with disabilities, poor children, etc., who are facing unemployment. In this regard, I wish to call on all member states, development partners, the civil society to redouble efforts in creating a necessary environment and taking realistic actions in addressing the youth unemployment crisis, especially the traditional marginalized young people. As outlined in the ILO's COVID-19 policy framework, this requires maintaining broader support to the economy and labor market, along with specific measures targeting the most vulnerable group. With the workforce occupied by an increasing Asian population, especially in developing countries, most of the minority or marginalized young people today are not adequately trained or do not have the requisite skills to compete in the global job market. If we have to have a highly trained and skilled labor force ready for decent work in the near future, there's need to address the problem at scale. So what needs to be done? I'll speak from the perspective of governments. I think as governments, we need to invest more in providing an equitable, inclusive, and quality education for our young people leaving no one behind. Research abounds that children living with disabilities, the girl child, very poor children, children involved in armed conflict, children living in hard-to-reach areas receive very little or no education in their localities. We cannot expect our youth to have decent jobs, to live in dignity, to support their families, and to be useful members of their society if they remain untrained and unskilled. Governments and development partners must invest massively in education and transforming education to ensure that it provides the requisite 21st century skills that young people need to be qualified for decent work. Transformation in education, especially at foundational levels, must include ICT, STEM, and entrepreneurial education, as well as critical thinking and computational skills. In my country, the government has prioritized education as part of the government's human capital development agenda. In transforming education through the free quality school education program, we have removed barriers to accessing education. So the government now ensures that measures are in place to ensure that no child pays school fees. The government has allocated 22% of the national budget for the education sector, has removed the payment of tuition and examination and all forms of payment for pupils in public schools for 15 years of schooling. That is 3 years in preschool and 12 years in primary and secondary education. Government also provides textbooks and other learning materials to all pupils and provides school meals to primary school pupils in vulnerable communities as well as children living with disabilities. Government constructs and equips classrooms in hard-to-reach areas, trains teachers and school leaders as well. The Ministry of Basic and Senior Secondary Education has also revised a curriculum framework for basic and senior secondary education to make the syllabuses relevant and consistent with 21st century skills and knowledge demands. The ministry has also developed policies like the Inclusive Education Policy, which focuses primarily on mainstreaming children with disabilities into mainstream schools. We also have the Radical Inclusion Policy, which looks at 4 categories of children. That is pregnant girls. Hitherto, pregnant girls were banned from continuing schooling. But the government, through this new policy, ensures that when a girl gets pregnant, as long as she is healthy enough, she continues going to school. The policy also targets children living with disabilities, very poor children, and children in hard-to-reach areas. We also have a comprehensive safety policy, which have all contributed to the transformation of education in the country. It is a known fact that in most African or developing countries like Sierra Leone, the government is the biggest employer. This is highly unproductive and the recipe for the mass unemployment and inadequacy of remuneration for jobs within the public service. Governments cannot provide jobs for all the young people. There is therefore a need for engagement in the private sector, and in commerce. However, governments need to create the right platform and space for the economic empowerment of young people, especially women and the disadvantaged children. This could be done through, one, providing vocational or lifelong skills for young people that will make them self-reliant, provision of entrepreneurial training and skills, provision of loans, microcredit, financial services, as startup capital to young people to invest in commerce. Creating the enabling environment for young people, especially women, to have access to land through land rights reforms. This will give them opportunity to engage in productive agriculture. The centrality of youth in decision-making processes is also key in addressing the global unemployment crisis. As the cliche goes, he who feels it knows it. Youths can contribute effectively in discourses affecting them. Therefore, furthermore, there is need to robustly support youth-led development efforts. Young people are important actors in achieving sustainable peace. They must be treated as partners in the long-term work of peace building, in creating a culture of prevention, including through acknowledging their lived experiences, leadership, and expertise, and the provision of resources, such as funding and training. The enactment of very enabling legislations can also accelerate the empowerment of youths and women. Very recently, Sierra Leone enacted the Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment Act, which requires government to reserve 30% of jobs for women, including leadership positions, the cabinet, diplomatic service, and stipulates that 30% of candidates put forward by any political party for parliamentary and local elections must be female. This is protectionist, but it is critical in ensuring that traditionally marginalized groups like women and children are given space in decent jobs within the states. In concluding, I wish to reiterate that a global crisis awaits us, and as we work to address this crisis, let's be frank in bringing out solutions, concrete solutions that will focus more on marginalized young people facing unemployment. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Amara Sowa, for your remarks, acknowledging the strong impact of the COVID pandemic on youth and the necessity to build partnerships to face those challenges, especially regarding investment in inclusive education. We will now watch a video featuring youth with lived experience, including Raneris Isis Salaya Calderon, a Venezuelan immigrant living in Bogota, Colombia. The second youth will be Versilen Diaz, a lawyer from a Quilombola community in Brazil. And then Charlene Cassie, 28 years old, living in Tondo, Manila, one of the poorest slums in the Philippines. It looks like we have a few issues with the video. Okay. So we will go to our next speaker, right? So our next speaker is Mr. Guillaume Charvon. And Guillaume is a national director of ATD Force World USA and co-founder and chair of Working and Learning Together Electronics Recycling, Walter, an eco-social business based in Brooklyn, New York. He has worked 20 years for ATD Force World in France, Burkina Faso, and the United States, conducting action research and building collaborative projects with people most impacted by exclusion and poverty. So we were supposed to start by watching a video, but I'm not sure it's working.
It's like when you have a whole bunch of keys, and all of your keys unlock different doors, unlock different opportunities. This was like a new beginning for me, you know? This is like, I felt like this was a great opportunity for me to change my way of thinking and to change things that I do on a regular basis. And from beginning, like seeing the progress of everything that, like, cause literally this warehouse was empty. Nothing here, no tables, nothing, no computers, it was empty. So to see it from then to now, I'm proud of myself, and I'm proud of my colleagues, I'm proud of the CEO, and I feel like we've all done a very, very good job.
I actually wanted to just work, find some type of work, and since this was an opportunity for me, I might as well take it. I haven't worked in 10 years, so I might as well try to take whatever job opportunity comes to me. But this is definitely a good one, and a place I actually want to be.
Having a job provides money. That money gives you the freedom to go do things with family and friends. You know, if you have money, you can afford it. So basically, it just kind of everything got better.
Not before I couldn't work. I couldn't find anything that would teach me how to do most of the stuff that we do here, like dismantling, using the pallet jack, hand truck. But yeah, money is the main reason, yes, but it's also the skills to have different, like, in different fields, most likely. If I either get fired or I quit this job, which honestly, I don't see myself quitting at all. But it's like having the skills to dismantle something, to know how computers work or how a laptop works or how to clean a hard drive. It's like I can go into different fields for those things, and I'll know how to do it, and I'll know how to do it well.
We have a dual mission to responsibly recycle electronics and to provide employment opportunities to young adults in Brownsville who are facing obstacles to employment. That we're targeting certain people in our community who would otherwise not be able to or have a very hard time getting a job, people who have experienced homelessness, who have gone through the criminal justice system.
For many of them, for many of our employees today, we met them through the Story Garden, which is ATD Force World's action. And by getting to know them as children, we were witness of their willingness to grow as adults, to grow as contributors to our society, and also of their entrepreneurial aspirations. For many people living in poverty, to reuse and to recycle, to be creative around how to use things that are for others considered as waste is very important.
One thing that Jonathan pays attention to is what we all do best, and usually he'll set us up with different tasks so that way we know what we can do first. No matter what we're doing, we're able to pick up after each other. Like if one is falling behind, then we're able to pick each other up. Because we're all a team. That's just how it has to be.
What I'm hoping for Walter is to become much bigger than what it is right now. And do I want to be part of that process? Yes. I would like to be here and watch Walter grow into something more than just being this one warehouse in Brooklyn.
It's like I want to be somebody who can give other people opportunities just like they gave to me. everybody here, because if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't really want to be here. The environment lets me know that this is where I want to be. Because this is the first job that I've had where I was actually comfortable to come to work. And I didn't have to, really worry about being judged or anything like that. Like Jonathan and G were people who accepted me for me. They enjoy me, I enjoy them. My company is their company, you know what I'm saying? So I feel like me being here, it's gonna open up a lot of different doors for me and also for them as well.
After this beautiful video, Guillaume, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Aya, for your introduction. I am very honored to be part of this conversation today, and I would like to thank my fellow panelists for their important contribution. It is not surprising to any of us that the reason underlying the unemployment of marginalized young people are the very same ones that cause their marginalization. We know that there are systemic barriers that are economic, social, environmental, and geopolitical. But we also know that concrete solutions are at hand. For more than 20 years, as Aya was saying, I have been involved on a daily basis with young people in France, in Peru, in West Africa, and now here in the US. Everywhere, I could see the same strength, the same inventiveness, the same willingness to be useful to their family and to contribute to their community. Many of the young people I have met while they were living on the streets of Ouagadougou in Burkina Faso were there because they wanted to contribute to feed their family. It was their attempt to overcome the challenges of social transformation and environmental changes that led them to survive in the streets, as many could not encounter the job opportunity they were looking for. I remember unaccompanied minors who were fleeing armed conflicts and seeking asylum in France. I remember many internally displaced young people, like José Santiago in Peru, a 16-year-old living on the streets and who had to leave his place because of the violence in his community and the lack of economic opportunities. These systemic barriers exist everywhere. In the US, we can think of the school-to-prison pipeline, which pushes young people out of school and into the criminal justice system. This impacts disproportionately youth of color and youth with disabilities. All those barriers seem so big sometimes. At 81st World in New York, we needed to break them down. To understand what needs to be done in terms of employment, the first step was to understand what marginalization and exclusion mean. Over 3 years, a national research team composed of people with lived experience of poverty, academics and practitioners led a national research following the merging of knowledge methodology. This methodology was developed so people impacted by persistent poverty, academics, and practitioners could think together on an equal footing. This work identified 9 dimensions of poverty, including one on employment, that gave us a theoretical blueprint of what needs to be tackled. My purpose today is not to get into the details of those dimensions. In order to open a concrete path to overcoming persistent poverty, we know now that they need to be addressed simultaneously in an integrated way. Let me just say that those dimensions are organized around a pivotal aspect of poverty that we call disadvantaged area. The report read, some people are forced to live in specific areas where there is a concentration of hard aspects of life. These areas have failing schools, collapsing infrastructure, high rates of unemployment, little access to healthy food, poor water and air quality, and lack of affordable medical care. This concentration of hard aspects of life calls for a targeted approach if we were to create jobs for marginalized young people. 80 World and its partners recently launched Working and Learning Together Electronic Recycling, Walter, an eco-social business in New York City that you just saw in the video. We do electronic recycling as a way to create jobs for young adults from the underserved neighborhood of Brownsville in Brooklyn. The first step we took was to find a warehouse in the neighborhood. Opportunities need to be brought to the young people, to find them where they are, where they live. Community-based companies are the first concrete solution to provide jobs to marginalized people. Our second decision was to do what we call a targeted open hiring process. We are looking for and reaching out to young people for whom, because of their life circumstances, finding a job is almost impossible. We don't do background checks or drug tests. Many of our employees today have no degree or formal working experience. They are living in homeless shelters, and some of them have been through the criminal justice system. Our third decision was to co-design our management style with the employees. At Walter, we have high expectations. The company needs to be self-sustainable, and at the same time, the way we function is very flexible. Those expectations and our flexibility to create the conditions so everyone can succeed give shape to experimenting new ways of management. At Walter, we want to find together ways for people to grow professionally and personally. Since some of our associates started working at Walter, some got access to more stable housing or to their identification papers. Walter is a human-centered, environmental-focused company that intends to prove that concrete solutions to lasting unemployment for marginalized young people are possible. Ranel, one of Walter's associates that you could see in the video, was telling me yesterday, it all begins with one opportunity. As a global and local communities, we have to be collectively bold and innovative enough to create those opportunities. To finish, being here today at the UN means a lot to us, because 1 year ago, we were signing the lease of our warehouse in Brownsville. To celebrate this anniversary, let me make a wish. I hope that many of you will share what we do and will help us grow our impact. Let us recycle your used electronics so Walter can contribute to preserving the planet and create jobs for young people facing systemic barriers to access dignified jobs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Guillaume, for sharing concrete tools to better understand systemic barriers to unemployment for youth, and also for highlighting that dignified work or decent work is one through which you belong to a community. And we can clearly see on the video how being essential to the business is important for the youth at Walter, and how the stability offered by consistent work changes their daily life. Can we see now the video with the youth, lived experience from the youth?
Mi nombre es Ragneiri Salaya Calderón, soy inmigrante venezolana, especialmente de la isla de Margarita, la perla del Caribe, por cierto. Llegamos acá a Bogotá, a la localidad de Ciudad Bolívar, del barrio Arabia, con mi papá, mis 2 hermanas, mi sobrinita y mi mamá. El comienzo no fue nada fácil porque llegamos a un lote de invasión, que de cierta forma es ilegal porque no es habitable. Llegamos acá con la esperanza de poder prosperar, ya que en nuestro país la situación no es tan sencilla como quizás se puede pintar en otros lugares. Y aquí estamos con fe y esperanza de que vamos a echar para adelante. Para transportarme al centro Juan Bosco Obrero, allá esperamos un alimentador que es de color verde, súper grande. Ya de ahí caminamos los 8 o 9 minutos más o menos que nos tardamos en llegar al centro. Cuando llegamos acá a Bogotá, la localidad de Ciudad Bolívar, no teníamos idea del Centro Juan Bosco Obrero, pero mi hermana sí. Entonces llegamos acá y nos ingresaron a un proyecto llamado CAJOF, y en el proyecto nosotros ingresamos a un técnico laboral en soporte y mantenimiento de tecnologías de la información, donde básicamente nos enseñaron mantenimiento preventivo de software y de hardware, lo que es base de datos. La acogida que he tenido acá en el Centro Salesiano, sinceramente, ha sido de gran bendición. Me he sentido súper cómoda porque ellos nos han brindado herramientas y posibilidades. Gracias a la Sociedad Salesiana me encuentro laborando en la obra salesiana del Divino Niño Jesús, ubicado en el 20 de julio. Gracias a ellos puedo tener un desarrollo integral como persona, también aprender cada día una cosa nueva, porque ellos son los que han creído en mí y en mis capacidades como persona, porque no solo basta con amar a los jóvenes, sino que ellos se sientan amados.
Acá en Colombia, la gran ayuda que hemos recibido los migrantes ha sido por parte de los salesianos y también otras organizaciones nacionales e internacionales como PAO, que atiende a población migrante, y la OIM, que se relaciona con temas de salud.
La propuesta educativo-pastoral salesiana para migrantes que desarrolla la Sociedad Salesiana en Colombia está alineada con el Plan Integral para las Migraciones establecido por el Gobierno Nacional, desarrollado a través del COMPES 3603. A través de este COMPES, fundamentalmente el gobierno quiere garantizar la protección, la seguridad y la defensa de los derechos de la población migrante. En Bogotá, en la localidad de Ciudad Bolívar, donde se encuentra el Centro Juan Bosco Obrero y vive Raneiris, nosotros hemos trabajado articuladamente con la alcaldía local para garantizar la implementación de las orientaciones del COMPES y también trabajar articuladamente con organismos internacionales como ACNUR y la OIM, con los socios de ACNUR y de la OIM, buscando siempre garantizar la defensa de los derechos de la población, de los niños, de los jóvenes y de las familias, dando razón de la misión salesiana en la localidad de Ciudad Bolívar.
Excelências, senhores e senhoras, caros colegas, sou quilombola. Os quilombolas são povos negros, descendem de pessoas que resistiram ao processo de escravização aqui no Brasil e possuem várias características próprias que os definem, seja culturais, religiosa, modo de vida, uma trajetória histórica própria, dotada de relações territoriais específicas, ou seja, são povos coletivos que vivem em coletividade, uma relação coletiva. Nessa breve intervenção, gostaria de trazer 3 ou 4 pontuações relacionadas ao trabalho pleno e decente da juventude no Brasil e no mundo. No Brasil, os quilombolas, na Índia, os Dalits, os Arates, na África e em Roma, são nomes mais conhecidos de comunidades discriminadas no trabalho e nas descendências que estão presentes no mundo. A negação ou falta de acesso à educação, saúde, ou lugares de cultos religiosos são exemplos de como expressa a prática discriminatória baseada em complexas estruturas hierárquicas socialmente enraizadas. Segundo ponto, nossos vilarejos, nossas comunidades quilombolas estão localizadas, em sua maioria, em áreas rurais no Brasil. A segregação geográfica é muitas vezes forçada e socialmente ditada, deixando quilombolas e outras comunidades discriminadas no trabalho e na descendência excluídas das escolas, das universidades. E quando saem do quilombo, são obrigados a se estabelecer em áreas periféricas das grandes metropolitanas, das grandes regiões metropolitanas, e a trabalhar em profissões manuais degradantes, análogo à escravidão. Em terceiro ponto, e último lugar, quando os jovens recebem a oportunidade, eles se destacam. Eu tive a honra de ser reconhecida como uma das mulheres de sucesso pela revista Forbes em 2022. Porque sou a primeira mulher quilombola a obter um título de mestre em Direito no Brasil e desenvolveu um excelente trabalho em defesa das comunidades quilombolas. Essa conquista só foi possível, claro, graças à minha determinação, do meu povo, que buscou, né, a garantia dos direitos, né, mas também ações afirmativas estabelecidas no Brasil no início dos anos 2000. Resultado, é claro, de reivindicações da população negra. Mas para isso eu tive que sair da minha comunidade, deixar minha família aos 11 anos de idade e passar por várias situações degradantes, né, desumanas, submeter ao trabalho doméstico infantil e outras violações. Hoje atuo em defesa e garantia dos direitos das comunidades quilombolas em todo o Brasil, que tem como prioridade garantir que o governo titule nossas terras, garanta a produção de alimentos em nossos territórios, o acesso à educação e à saúde e outras políticas básicas dentro do território, sem necessidade de que nós saímos das nossas comunidades. Encerro aqui solidarizando-me com cada comunidade do Brasil, do mundo, que passa por essas situações de discriminação. Oprehome, já em Brai, Solidarité, nenhum quilomba menos, o Brasil também é quilombola.
My name is Sherlyn Kaasi, 28 years old, living in Tondo, Manila, one of the poorest slums in the Philippines. I should be with you today in New York. Why I'm not able to speak with you in person? Unfortunately, this is not the first time I've been experiencing exclusion. This time, I've been struggling to get a US visa for the third time in a row, despite all the guarantees that I presented. Before, in 2017, I got rejected 10 times for a job application as a call center as I'm not a college graduate. What kind of world does not believe we have potentials despite where we came from? Life Project for Youth understand it and believe that the youth has so much to offer. LP4Y provided me training to enhance and acknowledge my soft skills. I discovered that I was skilled and capable. I became aware that even if we live in the slum area, even if we don't have a college degree, even if our family is not supporting us, we have a place in the professional world and we have a talent to share. After my training in LP4Y, I successfully got a job in one of the biggest call centers in the Philippines. Even being a customer service associate, I was still badly judged by my managers, my co-teammates, and even the customers. Living in the marginalized area, I needed to wake up 4 to 5 hours before my shift. Once again, exclusion hit me, but I did not resign. I continued to work there for 2 years. I felt proud that I was able to reach my dream since I was a teenager. I could communicate regardless of the language, and this is my definition of being smart. I was included, able to sustain my family. I was a successful woman. I wanted to encourage the young women having the same background that they can still reach their dream. So, I joined the LP4Y movement to inspire, to advocate, to encourage, and tell the youth that if I did it, they can do it too. All the youths have potentials and place in this world. But it's the society and company's duty to help the underprivileged ones to bridge the gap. Excluded youth lack of education and network, so I asked the youth of Tondo what they suggest, and here it is. What if companies were at least providing decent employment? What if companies are believing in experience rather than diploma? What if looking for soft skills and investing in our training? What if women has the same opportunity as men? So now, what are your answers? These changes depends on you. You heard their voices, now let's see your act.
I'd like to repeat the question Charlene just asked us. What kind of world does not believe that we have potential despite where we come from? What if companies were believing in experience rather than diploma? We should all keep in mind these questions to build a more inclusive society. Now, we will listen to Mrs. Risha Gupta. Risha is a CEO and co-founder of Labia Foundation, an education-based nonprofit impacted 2.4 million vulnerable children. She holds a degree in education policy from Harvard Graduate School of Education and has been awarded the recognition of Sustainable Development Goals Young Leader.
Thank you so much, Arya, for having me, and really grateful. Can everyone hear me all right?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, wonderful. Firstly, I'm extremely grateful to have heard the stories of all the wonderful change makers and young people from across the globe. My name is Cha. I'm one of the co-founders at Labia, and today I'll speak to you, all of you, about the journey that we've had in terms of working with children's well-being, addressing the well-being of children who are most marginalized here in India, and the learnings that we've had in the process. I started my journey as an educator when I was 16 years old. That's when I entered my first classroom. And in my journey, although there are countless stories and wonderful memories as a teacher, of being a teacher in 10 years, I think the number one learning I had was that me teaching and children learning are two very different things. And over the years as an educator, I learned that I was not preparing my children for the adversities that they were facing outside of school. My journey, unfortunately, I lost two of my students. One was to community violence, and another to a disease that I recovered from when I was a child. And both of these incidents pushed me and my community and the other children that I taught in all these low-income communities what it meant to come from where they came from and how much that mattered in just the life that our children have. And all of this combined with many other losses that I and my children faced in that journey pushed me to think beyond my role as an educator and what more we need to do systemically towards the emotional well-being of our children. And so in 2017, I and two of my co-founders, Vedant and Malika, started Labia to address the problem in a systemic way in partnership with governments. And just for context, there are over 1.2 billion children today living in poverty multidimensionally across the world. And many of these face various issues across the globe. Currently, there are 190 million children in India alone who experience multidimensional poverty and who are enrolled in public schools across India. Most children come from household incomes of less than $2 a day and from low socioeconomic backgrounds who are vulnerable and at risk as per any and all global standards. This vulnerability of our children leads to difficult emotions on the day-to-day, including increased insecurities, decreased learning interest, shame, demotivation, and all of this going unaddressed in the long run leads to larger issues that we see amongst young people today, which includes them less likely to pursue higher education, decreased chances at employability, and of course, deteriorating mental health. In summary, children in public schools lack the essential skills required to become effective learners and deal with the ill effects of poverty. So how do we solve for this? We up here realize that social emotional learning and international education best practice can solve for this. And there are multiple studies across the globe suggest that investing in children's emotional well-being, I'm so sorry for the background, my husband is a little bit unwell, can lead to returns almost of $11 to a return in the form of health, education, and employment outcomes. And so when we spoke to our three main stakeholders, our parents, our children, and our governments, we realized that while everyone wants children to learn and everyone wants children to be happy and young people be happy. There is a lack of expertise when it comes to addressing children's and young people's well-being systemically, which is where Labhya comes in. We partner with state governments to help them integrate a daily social emotional learning class across all public schools of the state. And so just like our children have math, science and English classes, they now have a well-being class dedicated to children's well-being, facilitated by regular school teachers. Of course, we support the government from end to end through localized curriculum, teacher capacity building, monitoring, evaluation, and change management, while being empathetic towards the fact that public schools are very much burdened and many public school teachers are heavily underpaid and of course are under a lot of pressure to do a lot of logistical work, and we incorporate in the way we design and implement the program. Currently, we at Labhya are working with 3 state governments to make sure that 2.4 million children able to experience this well-being class every day across 22,000 public schools across India. And these are also one of the world's first, largest and longest running well-being programs for children's well-being. And we are grateful to be externally evaluated by organizations like BCG to understand that we do and validate it globally. In terms of what our dream is, just like many of my children that I taught in my schools, the children that we work with at Labhya through our government partnerships, our goal is to work with 30 million children by 2030 to make sure that 30 million children through Labhya have access to the right kind of skills, that have access to the skills that make sure they are better relationship builders, have the motivation to learn, resilient, to be able to cope with the ill effects of poverty, really thrive in life, become entrepreneurial, employable, and of course, better and productive human beings and citizens of the world. And of course, this is a call to action for all of us to prioritize well-being of our children, our most marginalized children in the world, as we think about education and employability in the long run. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Risha Gupta, for sharing with us the innovative educational programs you are designing for the children affected by multidimensional poverty and how they can have long-lasting and impactful effects over their life. We will now listen to Mrs. Elizabeth Moshirian and Mrs. Alphonsine Sefou, youth delegates from the Baha'i International Community. Lizzie and Alphonsine, the floor is yours.
Hello. As Arya said, hello, I'm Lizzie. I'm currently interning at the Baha'i International Community and serving as a youth delegate for the Commission for Social Development.
Hi, I'm Alphonsine, and I'm a representative of the BIC as well, only this week for the NGO CSocD.
Thank you so much to everyone at the Committee for Social Development, especially the NGO CSocD chair, Jean Quinn, for inviting us to this panel, and of course, Arya, for moderating it. It's really such an honor to be here today and be sharing some thoughts and insights. We wanted to first start by drawing a holistic view of the idea that every human being has inherent dignity and the capacity to make a meaningful contribution to society. The fact that this is not always recognized and the dignity of many abased by exploitation reflects some of the fragmented values of society today, such as those that justify selfishness, reward exploitation, excuse indifference, and glorify consumption, ultimately exacerbating inequalities. This goes to show that there are many steps that need to be taken towards building a better society that is inclusive of all, empowering, and built on this recognition and belief of human dignity.
Every individual has a right to decent work, and this should be in an environment where basic human rights are attributed, ensuring social protection for all, regardless of the sector worked in. Further, decent work should provide livable financial means and foster capacity building in individuals, whereby both individuals and collective groups, such as communities, can benefit therefrom. Within this, we also need to recognize that work is one of the many elements of life, and understand that the capabilities and skills that can be developed outside of the workplace have the potential to enhance both one's well-being and the very work one does. For this to occur, though, systems of support that focus on empowerment and developing inherent capabilities are required. This support and empowerment can potentially be fostered through grassroots community efforts aimed at ensuring first the recognition of youth as dignified and useful in workplaces, and also focused on ensuring these spaces are safe and decent. Among adults, youth are often seen as the most vigorous demographic, but when youth are marginalized as the consequence of unfair working conditions with minimal pay, as well as limited access to employment, we immobilize the progress of all of humanity.
The disempowering effects of unprotected work and unemployment need to be acknowledged in that they can foster a set of apathetic attitudes towards one's outlook on life and future endeavors, as well as engaging with processes aimed at advancing society. Hopefully, in recognizing this and including broader narratives on the experiences of many youths around the world, action can be taken that focuses on empowering and re-engaging marginalized youth in conversations around decent work and how this can become a reality within their communities and eventually the global framework. Again, drawing the focus to community-based initiatives where youth can actively engage in efforts that foster collective learning and action offers a potential means by which the marginalization of youth in society can be rectified. For this to occur, though, youth need to feel included, heard, and useful in these dialogues. A community coming together and looking at how unemployment, especially amongst youth, can be tackled within their specific locality also needs to consider developing spaces where youth can enhance their own skills and gain knowledge. In this period of youth where we're all growing as individuals and finding our place in the world, having backed support that recognizes the dignity of all and values personal development, which no doubt contributes to our capacity in the workplace, is so essential. For this reason, education is vital more than ever. Although this sadly is not a reality everywhere, work should never be done at the cost of education, and employers should take into consideration the many obligations and pressures youth are under from their performance in various areas of life, for example, social, financial, and academic areas. Additionally, ensuring that youth know their rights as workers is empowering and provides the knowledge of what should and shouldn't happen in the workplace, potentially reducing the risk of exploitation.
There's a really great global initiative that draws on engaging younger youth in programs that focus on developing elements of capacity and identity as they navigate entering their period of youth and adulthood. This also involves having an older youth mentor younger ones, which is effective because as youth, we are the closest in age and experience to these younger youth who are preteens and can relate to a greater extent in the process of uplifting those around us. I would like to take a moment to share my personal experience with this. I volunteer as a mentor for a group of younger youth between the ages of 11 and 14 years old that I will refer to as a junior youth group. The goal of the junior youth is to solidify the power of expression and to see how we can help others around us in a concrete way. By animating the junior youth group, it has been possible for me to develop skills such as organization, patience, and openness to realities and cultures that aren't my own. The junior youth group has always been a space that I tried to make pleasant by telling the participants to speak in a respectful manner to one another. By trying to see how we can help the ones around us, we have had to create projects that touch the reality of the participants and their communities. Questions like, what would you like to see improve in the community? What is a problem that you would like to solve for the people around you? What are your talents? Help the group create projects in which they felt drawn to naturally. For example, selling cookies and lemonade in an effort to raise money for a dog shelter or making soaps for homeless shelters have been activities that have been conducted by junior youth and youth in my neighborhood. To conclude, by engaging all members of a community, hopefully we can bridge a gap between generations and draw on the powers of every individual by encouraging them to use their strengths and develop their skills, which will no doubt contribute to one's career. Further, workplace values such as ensuring worker protection, rights and safety are vital to building a sustainable working environment that is conducive and encouraging of both the advancement of one's working skills as well as their personal development.
Thank you. It's been such an honor to speak on this panel alongside so many incredible people. Thank you again to the NGO CSocD for this opportunity, for sharing some insights into the experience of youth and ways we can reduce inequalities on a local and global level. Hopefully, as more action is taken in this regard and relevant reflections made from the action, the advancements of our learnings on collective efforts aimed at reducing inequalities can contribute to a more unified and inclusive world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lizzie and Alphonsine. Thank you for reminding us that everyone, including youth, has a capacity to make a meaningful contribution to society and advancement of humanity. Thank you for reminding us as well that work should never be done on the cost of education. I will now give the floor to Mr. Khaled Imam, who is joining us through a video. Khaled Imam is an organizing partner at the United Nations Major Group for Children and Youth. He is a specialist in international human rights law and the executive director of Justice Call organization. Mr. Khaled, what role youth-led organization can play in providing opportunities for youth employment?
Nice to be with you today. Thank you, and thanks to the NGO Committee on Social Development for giving me the opportunity to share with you about how the situation of youth and the employment looks like and what the major challenges facing young people when it comes to finding decent jobs. A little bit about myself. My name is Khaled Imam. I'm a human rights lawyer from Egypt and executive director of Justice Call, which is a youth-led organization works to empower, protect, and connect young people in the MENA region. In the next few minutes, I will share with you some self-reflections from my experience about the context of youth and employment in the Arab region, how the world of work, jobs, is changing from a youth perspective, what is the role of youth-led organization in creating job opportunities for young people, and finally, recommendation to overcome employment inequalities in the region. The Arab region is one of the youngest regions worldwide, with the largest youth cohort that it has ever seen, with young people between the ages of 15 to 29, making up around 30% of the population, or somehow 110 million young people. In this region, there is 60% of the population has not yet reached the age of 30. Youth across national borders in the MENA region face similar challenges, in particular finding decent jobs, lack of growth, shrinking civic spaces, lack of opportunities for self-realization, and limited access to information, and obtaining a quality education. In this region, young people don't lack talent or imagination, they lack access to resources and decent jobs. Then what is the main challenges that facing young people when it comes to finding decent jobs? First, statistics reveal that 1/3 of the active young people in the region are unemployed. Imagine 1/3 of young people. This is almost twice as high as the world average. This is, of course, affecting more vulnerable young people, such as young people who live in poverty, young people who live in rural area, refugees, displaced people, migrants, young women and girls, people with disability. The situation got even worse with the COVID-19 pandemic. But why it's difficult for many young people to enter the labor market in the region? Here we go to the first challenge, in my opinion, which is a demographic change and the changing of the nature of work. The education system in the region is not yet adapted to the current demographic change. We all know that in each era, challenges are different, priorities are different, and even the ways to deliver learning and education are changing. As an example, the education is advancing our knowledge and new jobs are emerging in the market right now. And this advancement and new types of jobs are made by a usual lack of skills or knowledge in the current labor market, reduced by the current education system. And this will take us to the second challenge, which is skill mismatches. The current education system and curriculum do not match the needs of the labor market and the changing nature of work. To be specific, this is due to that the educational curriculum content that's so busy and irrelevant to the labor market needs. Second, that as a young people and children, we are not learning enough important skills that the labor market requires right now, such as learning how to learning management, communication, creativity, critical thinking, problem solving, collective action, and leadership. Third, youth graduate without knowing the current needs of the societies beyond the trend of IT jobs. For example, we all know that we can't all be IT engineers. We need different type of skills to meet different type of jobs. Here, I want to share with you a little bit about the solution. What is the role of civil society organization, in particular, that led by young people in creating job opportunities? Civil society organization, an organization led by young people, can play a critical role in creating job opportunities for all. How? By contributing to different elements, such as providing short and long-term training courses, working closely with employed young people to ensure that they are being educated about personal skills, the accessing scholarships, and also ensure that internships are given to youth to gain practical knowledge and skills, etc. As an example, for one of the success story of youth-led organization working to create job opportunities, Justice Call Partners in Syria, the Syrian Youth Assembly, working to create and continuously to improve effective learning methods for Syrian youth and refugees around the world, especially those who don't have access to public schools or traditional education system. They do this by promoting online knowledge and awareness of and also about the ever-changing technological trends. They also support young people with scholarships and training. And now they reached almost 120,000 young people that benefited from their learning courses in and outside Syria. I will end my presentation with 3 recommendations to overcome employment inequalities that I hope decision-making that attending the session today will take these recommendations into their consideration. First, public sector co-leadership model. We need to enhance the education system and move beyond the consultation with youth to really create intergenerational dialogue and having youth in the center of decision-making when it comes to education and creating jobs. Second, informal education. Informal education is very important and essential to open up and learning opportunities in non-formal settings, allow young people to discover approaches beyond the format of teachers and students, but actually to create the knowledge together. And third, as I mentioned before, the role of youth-led organization. My last recommendation will be collaborating with and supporting youth-led organization to create job opportunities through informal education. There should be more cooperation between global organizations and UN agencies with local youth organizations to develop a realistic plans to advance the matching between education and labor market. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Mr. Khaled Imam, for highlighting the critical role of civil society organization in bridging the gap between curricular education and the needs of the labor market. Your call for developing informal education is in line with Mrs. Risha Gupta's intuition about innovative educational approaches for marginalized children. After these inspiring presentations, I will now open the floor to any questions from the audience. So please raise your hand if you wish to take the floor. And maybe to get started, I will ask the first question to our panelists. So how do we make sure that the solutions we create for marginalized youth are co-constructed with them and have a real impact on their access to decent work? So maybe we could have an answer from a national level from you, Mr. Ambassador, and after to go more to the local level.
Yes, I think one of the things that runs through all the presentations is the need for education and training or the acquisition of skills. When we look at the Copenhagen Declaration, one thing is very clear. Member states made commitments. And one of the commitments, especially commitment 3, was the need to create employment. National government made commitment to create decent, formal employment for the people. And we realized, even from our presentations, all of us, that our people need to get trained. They need to be prepared for work. So how do we hold ourselves, I mean, as member states, accountable for the provision of the skills? I think we need greater advocacy. Civil society, NGOs need to hold us accountable to provide the requisite and education for our children, so that they'll be ready for the job market. And this is very topical because education is now at the top of the global agenda in the United Nations. The Transforming Education Summit prioritizes the provision of quality education, inclusive education, equitable education for our children. So, and the education that we provide also has to be very, very relevant. As I stated in my presentation, and as we heard from other speakers, we need to look at other things. We need to change. When we went to school, when I went to university, the rubrics we had were studying history, geography, Greek and Roman history and culture. But today, let's provide the kind of training that will prepare children, for the job market. Let's, even from, elementary school, let's introduce ICT. Let's focus on STEM. Let's teach our children the benefits of entrepreneurial education, so that not everybody has to wait for, government or corporate institutions to provide jobs. People can be self-reliant through, creating jobs for themselves. That's why we also need to introduce critical thinking, computational skills. I think these are the ingredients for 21st century education for our children. So I just focus on that. Let's hold national government, member states accountable to preparing our children, our young people, our marginalized people who had hitherto been left behind for jobs by actually providing relevant skills and training for them.
Thank you for your answer, Mr. Ambassador. Any other panelists would like to jump on this question? Yeah, go for it. Lizzie.
What comes to mind is that, any solutions that we want to create need to be relevant to the specific locality. Different countries, cities, and neighborhoods have different realities, and so obviously the solutions in one place may not necessarily be relevant and effective in another. So that needs to be kept in mind.
Also, we think that we should listen to youth in decision-making spaces in order to avoid their marginalization in society. And for this to happen, there needs to be a thoughtful and systematic approach to consultation between youth and the rest of society that ensures that all their apprehensions, their dreams, their problems are truly taken into account, and that all youths feel that they have a voice and that their ideas matter. This could, for example, take the form of a forum.
Thank you, Lizzie and Alphonsine. Guillaume, do you want to say a word?
Yes, thank you, Aya, and thank you all for your answer. I just wanted to add, I think that in order to have a led youth movement and proposal to create decent work, a few steps can be made. The first one would be to really create a way to create a collective knowledge from the individual experience. And for us at ETD Foursquare, this collective knowledge should be built with and around the knowledge, the experience of the ones most impacted by exclusion and poverty. My second point is that the job market of tomorrow is still to be designed. And that's the role of the new generation. 20 years ago, we said in one of the presentations, today the trend is toward IT. Maybe some of us anticipated that, but still, new jobs are created every day. And I think the youth movement should also build their skills towards creating designing this new job market. If we combine those two steps, I think we will have in front of us a very transformational approach to the job market that will have consequences on our education systems, that will have implication on relationship inside the workforce, relationships between generations, and that be very together creating the future of the workforce and of the job market for tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your insights. I have seen a few hands rising. Yeah. So please, you can go ahead. You can, open your microphone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you to all the speakers. Really appreciate everything. I had a question kind of about the role of the community. So we've seen several really beautiful examples of initiatives kind of at the level of both civil society organizations and governmental programs. And we know that the opportunities that are open to young people depend also on the sort of quality and the nature of the communities they live in. So I was just curious, anything any of the speakers could share or might be able to say about how communities have been sort of empowered to be protagonists in supporting their youth, and not just communities being sort of seen or placed in the position of just recipients of services or programming. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm not sure if Mrs. Risha is still with us and if she would like to answer the question.
If I am here and would love to answer. Thank you so much for your question. I think primarily a beautiful example of the work that we do with communities comes to mind. So when we develop a curriculum, which is then implemented and transacted in class, usually the linear approach to look at things is that children and their parents are sort of spillover impact, but the work that we do really ensures the community is at the center of the work. So how do we do that? So we initially, we started looking at children as change makers of their own realities, and the number one challenge that exists for young people to truly reach their potential many times is lack of support from their immediate environment, knowing that they depend a lot on their parents and people that they live with in these communities. And so how we started to change that is that after each lesson, children are and young people that we work with are encouraged to actually share their experiences and a reflection question with the community and the parents that they live with or the family members that they live with. And this has shown tremendous impact on the relationship that parents of low-income communities have with the institution itself. They feel more ownership towards working with the school administration towards the development of young people, and they feel ownership towards the of young people as well, which makes them change makers in their own realm. And that's how we look at, and that's a beautiful example that I feel that comes to mind to your question.
Thank you, Mrs. Risha. Do you want to have a word on that, Lizzie and Alphonsine? Or...
I can say something briefly. When you talk about communities being protagonists, what comes to mind is communities being proactive in their approach and really taking charge to make sure that their living environments are better, not just for certain individuals, but for everyone. And I have seen examples of this in like a lot of, at the forefront of a lot of policy-making decisions, but I think we're still in the process of seeing this being enacted effectively and learning about this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Lizzie. I have the time to take just one last question. Okay.
Thank you so much to all the various speakers, and especially the speaker from Work and Learning Together Electronic Recycling. I'm very much impressed with your initiative to make sure that we created a job despite for people having a university education or diploma. Again, to H.E. Amarasoa, thank you for your message from the government of Sierra Leone. You said a lot regarding the free quality education, wherein government is working assiduously to make sure young people are prepared and trained to be valuable employers in the future. My question at the moment is there any preparation the government has put in place for the short-term goal, like people without diploma, people without this formal education? How could they be included in the working force, especially in those developing countries wherein you said the government is the greatest employer, and meaning to some extent 70% of those employed has to go through the government. If we are talking about the free quality education for the future, what is the short-term goal for those without diploma and formal education to be included in the workforce?
Thank you, David. Now, there is a trajectory in the education system, starting from foundational learning to high school, right onto tertiary education. If you go to the Ministry of technical and higher education, the government has introduced skills development training and has established vocational centers in some of the district headquarter towns. If you look at the government's work plan, there's a plan to have a skills training center in almost every headquarter town in Sierra Leone. This provides middle-level manpower training that will equip youths who cannot have university degrees or those who've dropped out of schools but have the capacity to learn skills that will make them functional, that will make them self-reliant tomorrow. So for now, that's a short-term goal, even as the government seeks to transform education. We have that kind of program that provides manpower training, middle-level manpower training, that is technical skills to our young people, even as a short or a medium-term goal.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. I will now give the floor to Dr. Ifi Ofung, who is the main representative to the UN for Worldwide Network Nigeria and the Habitat International Coalition. She will be facilitating the regional breakout groups. Dr. Ifi Ofung, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Aria. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here this afternoon. I want to say that we've come to the most exciting part of this civil society forum. All through this week, we've listened to speeches, discussions around the priority theme, which is creating full and productive employment and decent work for all as a way of overcoming inequalities to accelerate the recovery from COVID-19 pandemic and the full implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. For us, in the civil society, we have our advocacy talking points. There are 5 of them. I just want to remind us again, that as we go into the breakout session, and as we are, we gather to share our thoughts on the priority theme, we should also remember the civil society key talking points, which is social protection, inclusive, people-centered, and gender-sensitive policies and programs, education, skill training, which again, was, well covered in today's presentation. So we will be going into groups, breakout groups according to our region, okay? So, and then these, we have 5 regions that would, break into. The first one is the Latin America and the Caribbean. And this group will be meeting behind me here. So I don't know if we have representatives from this group. So you would gather this side to talk about, the issues you've heard throughout the week and your thoughts on the priority theme. Africa will be meeting this way, okay? And then after that, Asia, if we have people from Asia, you would meet this way. And then the US and North America would meet in the middle behind there. And our representatives from Europe would meet at that corner there. So, and in each region, you're expected, as you gather, to have a chairperson, that would direct, the discussion. And then you will also appoint a rapporteur who will take notes and compile, the key points, your key points and the recommendations. And that will be submitted to us. Then you would have time, allocated to you to do these key issues. Number one is introductions and discussions on the, the general situation in your region, within your region, regarding productive employment and decent work and the other talking points that I have already listed. You have 10 minutes to do that, and we'll be putting up, I think, Lara, the details. Good. And then you also have 15 minutes to talk about the specific challenges and opportunities for productive employment, equal access, and wages for youth and women in formal and informal sectors. You have 15 minutes to discuss that and put your thoughts and recommendations together. Then, most importantly, how can civil society contribute to ensuring that we have decent work for all, eliminating inequalities in employment systems and social protection programs for everyone, both those in formal and informal sectors. So you'll be sharing, your thoughts, your ideas around this, and you have 15 minutes, to do this, to talk about this. Then, after that, we'll come together again, and each rapporteur from the 5 regions would, make a presentation based on the outcome of your discussions and your recommendations. So we would have like 20 minutes for this, group presentation, and each region will have just 3 minutes. So I will advise us, to, as we gather, in the region, we should, bring out the key recommendations, the key issues that you want, us to take note of. So, and if you have any questions, we'll be here to clarify them. Thank you so much. I yield back to Aria.
Thank you, Dr. Ifi. To conclude this inspiring dialogue, I would like to thank our distinguished speakers and our audience. Finding innovative solutions to address youth unemployment is a question of economic, social, and environmental justice. How do we make sure that jobs do not just keep youth living in underserved communities and neighborhoods in a cycle of poverty and exploitation? Youth who experience this contradiction in their daily lives can teach our whole society a new way to think about work. The experience of youth who are excluded from these opportunities offers our society a compass to design the type of jobs all people need. If we take this opportunity to think again about what work is, we can transform our society into a place where work for every individual is not simply about survival, but an opportunity to grow into the best of ourselves, to contribute meaningfully to our communities, and to be recognized for our contributions. With this, I will now invite you to join the regional breakout groups starting at 12:45 in this same room for 1 hour. Then please join us for the second thematic session of the forum starting at 3 p.m. with thematic is Rethinking the Dominant Economic Paradigm, Ensuring Social Protection and Just Transition in the World of Work. Thank you, everyone.